Hello! Yes, I am back. Here it is. Back to Tetris. Got a couple complaints that I had released a different video instead. Alright, um, okay, so we will be picking up where we left off, obviously, and the next thing that we need to do is get our the next thing I'd like to do is actually get our pieces in the grid. I think it'd be good to actually see some of them popping up, inside the grid here. A couple things to do, right? But we're gonna get this done. And there's a couple ways to do this, so I'm going to talk through some of these ways. So one way is we can just color in the grid squares to make it look like the piece is there. And then we just remove those classes and move it down to the next one. So if we have that horizontal line, like it'll fill up these four, so like say the red, these four spaces will be red. And then when it moves down, these four spaces will be red. And then when it moves down again, these four spaces will be red, but these ones will all be white again. So, that's one way to do it, so it simulates the block actually moving. The other way is that you can actually create another element, position it inside the box, figure out everything, and then actually have it hover over top of these images. That's going to be a lot more difficult, but it does provide a lot of stuff that we don't have with the other method. Like we could do animations, so we could actually see it sliding over one or see it sliding down versus just it appears down. Two different ways to do it. And I think the way that I'm going to go is we're going to go with the first option first, and we will probably move to the second option. But I want to get, that's a great refactor. So the first thing is let's just get them showing up in these grid squares, figure out our positioning system, how we're going to start rotating things, how are we going to start moving things, how are we going to start building this out. And then we'll worry about getting the... then we'll worry about getting the pieces to actually appear, or to actually like have their animations and float over top of it and stuff like that. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, building out our objects. So what we have here, right? We have our block object, which then inherits from which then has a shape object that's attached to it, and these are predefined templates. So that's great. We've got a couple different things here that, and you saw the syntax where we could do new block and then pass in the number of the shape that we wanted. So that's great, but that's great for using it in the console. Now we need to actually get it out onto the page. So this is a challenge. This is going to be kind of difficult, and there's a bunch of pieces that we're going to need in order to do that. So we're going to need to kind of upgrade some of these pieces. For instance, we're going to need something to hold the color of the block. Now, the decision for this is, should we place the color on the shape, or should we place the color on the block? As in, are all of our, let's say, 4 horizontal block, let's go Tetris, nope, Tetris. Well, my internet has been not good. Power's been going out as, or not going out, but kind of flickering throughout the day. So get ourselves hooked back up to the network. Luckily, this thing has battery, so if the power goes out, I'll probably just say goodbye really quickly. Well, not good, but say goodbye, wrap it up, and we'll have to shut down for a little bit. But hopefully, we'll be able to get connected to the network and hopefully some sort of internet access. And then we'll be back in business. Okay, well, I was just going to show you the example. So you remember, basically, are all of these going to be red, and then all of these are going to be blue? Or is it going to be you can have red ones of these and blue ones of these and green ones of these, and then any of these can be any color. So that's kind of the distinction and the determination that we need to use. I think for classic Tetris, probably what we want is to actually we want to use the we probably want to have a color set for each shape. So like all of these are always going to be red, all of these are always going to be blue, or whatever color we use. So for the moment, we're just going to use we'll use blue. Now I'm going to do a couple tricks here. This is we're going to start getting into a little bit of advanced JavaScript. I'm going to do some things that aren't going to look some of them are going to be kind of confusing, and again, I'm doing this like I was going to do this, or like I am doing this for myself and as a professional. So I'm not showing you guys like simple tutorial type methods. I'm showing you the full advanced methods of doing things. All right, so let's just say self.color, and for now we're going to give we're going to set the color on it explicitly. But in the future, this will be refactored into something else probably. It actually pulls it in from some data source that ties up with these shapes and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of refactoring as we go along. Okay, so here's the tricky thing that I was going to talk about is we want, so as this stands right now, if we do like new, B equals new block, and then we did B dot shape, it would give us our shape, and then we could do dot color, and it would give us the color. But what if we want the block to also have a color, and you want the same color to be available both for the shape and for the block? So the way to do that is to use the object.define property, and then we're going to say the object is block, string property. Okay, so we can do block, and then our property name is going to be color, and then our description is going to have a get handler. So we're going to say get, which is going to be a function, and it's going to return we're going to try it with the word this. So this dot shape dot color. So basically what happens is it creates this so that you could do block dot color, and it actually the code will pick that up and go, oh, actually let me go and get it from the shape, which is down here. So let's give this a shot. So we're gonna run this in here. We're gonna open up the console. We're going to take a look, and we should be able to do new var b equals new block 0, and then if we go b dot color, we get undefined. Okay, let's make sure that this stuff got set up correctly. Do we have any errors? No. Sources. Does that code actually... Oh, I don't see that code in the code that's on this page here. So we're going to do a refresh. There it is. Okay, so now we actually have the code. So it's always good to confirm that, yes, in fact, the code is actually being loaded in before you just say that your code's not working. Oh, that's right. We need to define it again. Equals a new block, 0. And then we go... What's wrong with that? Red is not defined. Aha, red is not defined because I did not use, sorry, it needs to be a string for now. And eventually we'll probably replace these with the actual color codes. But for the moment, they're just going to be strings. Okay, so flipping back over, we'll refresh yet again. var b equals new block 0. and then b dot color is undefined. B dot shape dot color is red. Okay, so this isn't quite working. What I've always done is added it as a string, so it's possible that I was incorrectly following my IDE when it said to, oh, object.define, call it on a non-object. Okay, so maybe I need to do the prototype of block. Block.prototype and refresh. Okay, no errors. So var b equals new block 0 and then b.color red. There we go. So do you guys see how that all kind of works out? So what happens is the call comes in and we grab a new block. This essentially adds the color method to the block. So that's what this is doing. So it's saying on block.prototype, add the property called color. So it's the same as if we did self.color. And then we add these things, and this define property can do a lot. There's more than just get. There's so many different things that you can do with define property that are really, really great. But all we really want is just this routing function. So when we call block.color, it actually fires this function which then calls this.shape.color, which then comes down here, grabs the color red, comes back up, returns that value out, and now it's actually through, the color actually comes through on the block object. So this is a great way to you not duplicate things. So we did write a little bit of extra code, but the nice thing is I don't have block.color and then shape.color, and I have to make sure that they always match. So if I change the color of the shape, I also have to change the color of the block, and vice versa. So this kind of makes sure that it keeps it all in line and that there's really only one place that you're grabbing the data from, and everything else gets just pulled in from there. So that's a really great way to accomplish that. So next, we've got a color. Great. So we know what color to place into the background of that block. But now we also need a way to give it its position. So the way I want to do the positioning is, let's say that the block is right here, right? And so it's this square, this square, this square, and this square. And it's the vertical, or sorry, the horizontal 4-block pattern. So the first one. What we want to do is, I'm just going to base it off of the bottom left corner. So that first element is basically right here. This is going to be, well, with the exception of a couple of these, and we'll have to deal with that when we get there, when we get the ones that are more of a Z shape type, where the bottom left corner isn't really the source for it. But we're going to base everything off of the bottom left corner at the moment, so it kind of matches our grid system, and there's a really good reason why. And the reason is, if we wanted to say that the block is 5 up from the bottom, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we would make sure that this is 0, and the block is defined with a coordinate of 0. Then we just add 5 to the coordinate, which gives us the position. So that's a really great way to do this, and I'm glad that we went with that method of defining the shapes, because it gives us this flexibility. So since the shape really is just talking about the shape of it and the color of it, but the block is more of the instance. It's the single instance of the block itself. So that's a more appropriate place to put the position. So let's create that. Self.position equals a new, well, we're going to make it equal to a new object which has an X, self.position equals x is null. Wait, I want it to be, I guess we'll set them to null at the beginning. Okay, so what this is going to do is, we'll refresh this and I'll show you. So now we can go var b equals a new block with a 0, and then I'm going to go b dot position, position, and it has an x and a y. So I could go position dot x and then position dot y. And it's going to give me the positions of the object based on the x and the y. So that's a really good syntax for what we want to do. And the position is going to start out when we create the block. We should probably it's probably we probably should make it part of the constructor. So when we create this shape, we're going to, or the block, we're going to tell it what shape it's going to use, and then we're going to give it our x and our y value. And so we'll initially set these to x and y. And when you're dealing with these object literals, or object whatever these are called, the left is considered the name of it, so it doesn't conflict with this name up here. The value is up here on the right, so this is more of a key, which you're defining here, and then the right is going to define the variable. So it's okay to name these two the same thing, even though you have a variable up here. Sometimes it's kind of nice so that everything that is X related lines up, and we know what's going on, and we know it makes sense what's referencing what. Okay, so now let's test that out, right? So we're going to create a var b equals a new block, and now we need to define both a shape as well as a coordinate, so 1 and 2. And now when we say b dot position, you'll see that we have our coordinate set for 1 and 2. So that's going to be a great way so that we can just grab, like, okay, what's this position, or whatever, like, are we going to set it here? Is it going to come in over here? Is it going to come in over here? So that's going to be a great way to kind of have it start coming in. Okay. So now that we have our color and we have our position of the block, we now actually have to start bringing it into, let's start going ahead and getting it into the grid here. So this is the hard part. Once we get it in the grid, it's going to be a lot easier to start moving things around and dealing with all that, but we need something that's going to get us in this grid. So what we need to do is we probably need to go ahead and start building out our objects. And what's kind of happening here is we have a little bit of we're starting to get some a pretty decent amount of code here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start extracting some of this stuff into its own files, probably. So we're going to create a new directory, JS directory. We're going to leave the index.js here, but I want to create a new, we're going to call this, we're going to do this in a sequential pattern. So we're going to first just do models.js instead of, a block.js and a shape.js, but we may end up having to go to that. I'm just not going to jump at that yet. So we're going to pull all this code out, We're going to move that over here. And now, of course, since we just created a new JavaScript file, we now need to add that to here so we get the same behavior. Text, JavaScript, source, and it's now in JS and models.js. So as your code base starts to grow, it's nice to kind of move things in. So now we know that everything in models defines our shapes and our blocks, and then everything in here is just our initialization logic. And the reason that I did that was because we're going to need another one, which is going to be our game engine. So I'm going to call this engine.js. Okay. Okay, so we need to add that before we forget. Let's go ahead and add that to our HTML page. Type, no, always with the quotes. JavaScript, source, JS, engine. Okay, and now we need to actually start building out. So, how do games work? This is a very common pattern, and this is pretty much how a lot of games work. Is there's a cycle, and what we do is we call it a tick cycle. So what that means is and that's kind of where you get your frames per second, your FPS, when you're playing games. So there's usually two loops going on. There's your display FPS, and then your engine runtime FPS. And they're not always in sync. Obviously the logic one has to be fast enough to handle all the different data that's coming in and everything else, so that it seems very up to date, very live, especially with multiplayer and stuff like that. And it's not laggy, and it doesn't take time to respond to your movements and calculate all the stuff that it needs to calculate. And then the graphic FPS, which we don't have to worry about at the moment, especially thanks to the way that the web and browsers and stuff work. They have their own redraw loops and stuff. That's a separate loop, and that would cause a slowdown, and that would cause things to look jumpy on the screen. Even though technically the game's still running and calculating everything as it should, it's just not displaying it and making it to your screen fast enough so that it doesn't jump around. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is, so we're going to start building out this engine. So what I want to do is I want to have a function called tick. So the tick function is going to be basically all gaming logic handled here. Okay, so we're going to have a tick function, and then we're going to have a set interval that calls tick every 60 frames per second is going to be every 16 milliseconds. But really, we're just kind of testing this out at the moment, so let's go ahead and just go with a larger number, 100 milliseconds. And what this is going to do is when this runs, it's actually going to call tick every 100 milliseconds. So let's check this out, right? So we go to console.log, and we'll say tick. And you guys can kind of see how this is working. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to make sure my window's up, and then I'm going to click the refresh button, and you should see, look how fast this is running. So all these requests are coming in all the time. So what it's doing is sitting there and doing a tick loop. It's basically sitting there and running, and every 100 milliseconds or so, it's not exact, it will process any of the logic that's in there. All right, so that's a game engine. That's really the trick to getting everything to kind of like all your logic and all that stuff to work, is to run off of this tick cycle. So that's great. So I'm going to, it just kind of irritates me that this is going to be sitting here ticking away in the background. So I'm going to close the tab, but it's perfectly fine to have that open and running, obviously, because your game is going to be running in it in a little bit anyways. Okay, so we've got our set interval that does our game logic at the moment, and what we want to do is, well, we need a so we've got block, we've got shape, but then we also need, let's see, here's our rows and columns. This is important. And what did we call these? We called them rows and cell. And then this was the box. So the box is really our playing area, right? So what we kind of need to be doing is we need to involve this box in there. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to, for the purposes of the engine, we're going to call this var playing, or var board, right? Because it's more of a, for now it's a board. It's a playing board. So it's like chess or something. You can use the same variable name. So that might make sense for us. We can change that later if we need to. So you've got var board equals, we'll get our jQuery selector to our box. So now we have our board, and what we want to do is we want to do actually probably what we want to do is create a board object that's going to hold a lot of this information. So again, we might actually want to split this out in other files, but for the moment we'll do this. Board equals a function, and it doesn't need to take anything because we know what everything is for this. So we're going to go var, same thing, var self equals this, and then we're going to say self dot area equals or self dot, sure, we'll call it area for now, equals our board object, or box, right? So that's actually going to be our playing area, and then we're going to do, so that's area, and then we also need items. So we're going to say self dot blocks equals an array, and it's an empty array at the moment. And actually, there's, well, actually, no, we might have more than one board. So I would say that board is a singleton, so there's only ever going to be one board on the screen. But I was talking earlier in one of the other videos about doing either like a multiplayer thing or you play against the computer. So we might actually want more than one board. So I'm going to leave this as a full class for now. And we can now switch this over to board equals a new board. The other thing to note is that order matters. So we need to make sure that we're loading our models in before our engine, because our engine now depends on models, because we're actually accessing something that lives inside of the model file. So we index is our init script, then we have model, and then we have engine. So that's good. We're loading our models in before our engine. Order is very important when we're dealing with stuff like this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we need to do a draw loop. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to create little functions that hang off of this tick function instead of actually writing all the logic in it, because it's going to become really, really large if we do that. So we're going to say, we're going to call draw, let's just call it draw, because we're obviously drawing blocks. So we're going to create the, well, let's leave the tick at the top, and then we're going to create a function down here called draw, And when we draw something, what we're going to do is we're going to go yeah, this works for now. We will do board, or for each, right? So actually, JavaScript has this really nice for each function that I like. So board dot what is it? Board dot or what do we call it? Blocks. Yeah. Dot for each, and then we pass in what some might know as a lambda, which basically has this syntax. So function x, and then so basically each item, as this iterates through, each item gets passed in as this, and so like this function will be called for each block that exists on this, and yeah. So we're gonna say block, or so x. Okay, so now we need to actually do our drawing logic. So we will say, oh man, now this is oh well, what we really need to do is x dot draw, and then pass the board into it for the moment. I think that's going to be a good way to do that. It may not be, but we're gonna do that for now. So we, in our block, we are now going to add a draw function. So self dot draw equals a function, and what it's going to do is it is going to well, it takes in a board, right? And then board dot so now we actually have our board. Our boards are up here, and we have a box, and that box has rows and has cells. Oh, and we're going to be using jQuery for all this, of course. Actually, what I'd like to do is let's do let's put our initialization logic inside of our board, so it kind of acts like a constructor in a way, and we're actually going to draw the board from that, and the reason is because then we can cache all these objects. So we're going to place this logic in here, and we're going to put some of this configuration objects on here. So we're going to say rows and columns, and so we're still passing in our rows and columns, and we can also pass in the box that it's going to be drawn on. Okay, so we've pretty much I know we've we've kind of eliminated this this file, but we're doing good things here. And what we're basically going to do is new, or let's just say var board. Let's just call it playing area, so we don't have naming conflicts at the moment. Naming area, or oh, we can call this board equals a new board, and then we're going to pass in the selector for the box, and then we're going to pass in how many rows? 20 rows with 10 columns each. So that's essentially doing exactly what we were doing before. Now it's all just getting passed in. We do need to do a little bit of cleanup. Make sure we define our I and our J. It's not really cleanup. So add all that on there. Alright, so when we refresh the page, we should see the same thing, unless I mess something up, which is very likely. Run, and yep, we messed something up. We did something not right. Board is not defined. Oh, that's right, because now our index.js requires our model.js. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to load in our model, and then our engine, and then our index. Okay, so now we refresh. Unexpected token. Unexpected token comes up when you have something wrong like this. So always click on the number. So as you saw, you see unexpected token. Click on the link over here. It takes you right to it, and it shows you this is the thing, and then you can kind of see what's going on. I could clearly see I started working with an object and then I stopped, and that's just because I want to at the moment. Where's board? Oh, here it is. I just want to make sure I didn't break anything with that refactor. All right, a little closer. We only got one. Box is not defined. Let's see where that's happening. Oh, that's here. Box append row. Okay, so it's because I'm not calling it $box anymore, although I can. Might as well. It'll make things a little easier. So we'll just call it $box. Now, when we refresh, bang, we get a page, and our engine's even running. So we're exactly back to where we used to be, but we did quite a bit of refactoring in here at the moment. Okay, so now that we've got that, I think that's it's a little inconclusive. Well, no, my goal is to... If this video is a little long, I'm sorry, but my goal is to get something shown on the page. So we're going to try to get that far, even if it takes a little bit more time to do. Okay, so where were we? We were here, right? Board, so self.draw, and we will do board. Oh, that's right, we needed to start caching some of this stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to say self.rows equals an array. And actually we're going to move the properties up to the top because that's a really great place for them. And then we're going to leave, we're going to have this init type stuff at the bottom. That way, you know, it has access to it because it was defined up here before it actually ran the code. So self.rows is an array, and actually it is an array. It's an array of columns is what it's going to be, right? So we need a. How do we do this? An array of columns. No. Rows is an array of rows. Well, what we could do is have the same thing we did down here. So we have a row. Well, but we don't need... No, I guess we can. Yeah, let's just do that. Row, and then we'll give it a number. So this will be our basically our index of it. So self dot index or x. It's really our x, right? No, it's our y. Well, but that's kind of confusing as well. So row, we'll just number. And so then we'll do var self equals this self dot do we need number? No, we don't need a number, actually. Because we're going to be adding these. Well, yes we do, though. But we... Because this is going to be strange. Self dot... And this is going to have columns. Self.columns equals an array of columns. We need an object that's going to be our jQuery object. And then we need we're going to need a var column equals a function. Same thing, var self equals this, and then self dot object equals actually we can pass the object in here, right? So obj, just using the $sign to mean that it needs to come from jQuery. It needs to be a jQuery object. So we'll do $sign obj and $sign obj, and we'll put the $sign in front of here. Why not? It's just a mental note for me. Using the $sign, definitely not required, but to me it tells me, hey, this is a jQuery object. So we're going to be passing those objects in as we cascade down through this. So now we're doing, instead of var row equals this, what we'll do is var row equals a new row, and then we're going to pass in this as the constructor. That's kind of confusing, I know. And we're also not using the $sign because this is no longer a jQuery object. This is now a one of our row objects. And then we will now have to change this to row dot dot object, right? $sign obj dot append, and we'll because this is going to get kind of long, we'll say var call equals that, and then we can do trying to think, good design and not too much complexity. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. So we need this to work right. We need this to be completely referential and completely useful for what we're trying to do, but at the same time not be so complex that it's impossible to read and things like that. So let's still do the $sign row. I can see some advantages with that. So we're going to do var $sign row equals this, right? So we're going to basically be doing two steps. So we're going to create the actual jQuery object. Then we're going to place the jQuery object inside the model, inside the row object. So that's what becomes its object. And then we're also going to keep an instance of that object, because now we need to do our, let's see, so then we can actually go back to using the $row dot append just like normal, and then we'll call this, we're still going to call this the $call, and then we're going to use, we're going to place it inside of our, oh, here's what I really wanted to do. Okay, so self, what we're going to do is self.rows dot push, and we're going to push in the new row object. There we go. Okay, that's the function. That's the functionality I was looking to do. Oh, but we also need to make sure that we push this stuff into the row. So let's do our appending at the bottom, actually. Again, sorry, this is a lot of refactoring going on really quickly. So we're still going to do our var row equals a new row. What we can do is just use that syntax, slightly favorable. Come on, there we go. And then we'll line those up nice and pretty. And then we will do in here, we can do row dot columns dot push our new column object, or call. So that's going to come in here and be stored on the column here. Okay, great, we're getting somewhere. It doesn't look like it, I know, but we really are. And so then we're going to place our row object into our collection. And we can, just for the sake of continuity between all of them, we're always doing the jQuery stuff first, and then we're doing our stuff second. So it should be create a jQuery row, place the jQuery row inside of our row. Now create the jQuery column, place the jQuery column inside of our columns. Then create the jQuery or append to the jQuery box, and then place the row inside of our quote-unquote box. Okay, so this is how we're dealing with real DOM objects, and also virtual objects are ones that we're creating down here. So columns, oh, actually, I didn't do this right. I did not. I want to do new column and pass that in. Okay. So now we're starting to get some structure here, and you'll see how that all starts to come into play and is really, really nice when we start working with it. One of the nicest things about it is exactly this. We can now do board.rows let's see. Oh yeah, board.rows, and then pass in self.position x, and then dot column. No, columns are y's. Sorry, rows are y's and columns are x's. That's going to be confusing. Column self position x dot object. So this is our basically our cell. That's the 0 cell. Let's see. But how are we going to do each one, right? So we've got our base position, but we also need to handle our shape. So Oh, that's right. Okay, this is going to get really complex really quickly. There's a lot of math in doing game developing and game designing. We actually need to drop down into our shape and grab our coordinates for our shape. So we need to do so we'll do self dot shape dot coordinates dot for each function x Okay, so now for each coordinate, did I spell that right? No. Okay, for each coordinate inside of self, we need to find its calculated coordinate. So let's, for example, I'm gonna break this up a little bit. I could probably do this in one line, but it might get rather confusing. So we're just gonna break this up a little bit so you can see what's going on. So var calc x, so our calculated x, and calc y is our calculated y. And we're gonna say calc x is equal to, let's see, the x, well that's not a good, let's just call this coord. It's not a good name using x when we're using actual x and y values. Coordinate dot x times, no, plus our self dot position dot x. So what we need to do is we need to take our coordinate, which is 0, and we're going to add our position, which at this case is 0, to the x. So that's going to give us the ability to kind of track the movement. Let's see. Nope, not that. Var calc y equals the coordinate of y plus self dot position y. Oh, spell that correctly so we can use that. Okay, and then we need to do board.rows self position. So it's not self position y anymore. Now we're doing our calculated y and then our calculated x and our object, and then dot. Now we're back in jQuery, so we're using normal jQuery now, and we will do add class. Well, actually, just at the moment, since we want to use that, we can do CSS color, or actually background color, and then set it equal to the color. So we can now do, because we have this down here, we don't have to call shape.color. We could just do self.color. Oh, don't want the quotes for that. Self.color. Okay. Now, will this work? Possibly. Let's figure it out. Okay, so our game engine is running, and we have our board. And now what we need to do is we should have a board object here, and we will do board dot what did we call it? Blocks. Right? Our model has blocks, yep. So we will add a blocks, or a block. Board dot blocks dot push, and we will now add a new block. What does it take now? It takes a couple things, right? Block, yep, takes a shape and an x and a y. So we'll give it a 0, a 0, and a 0. And hopefully, cannot read property 0 of undefined. Okay, so something's going on here. Let's figure out what line it is. What's undefined? So what we need to do is we're going to place a breakpoint. Great. Calc y has a value. Calc x has a value. Object. So board, rows, say row 0, columns, 10 columns, row 0, object, and then what's on the prototype of the object? Yep, it should have our CSS. Does it have a CSS? Yes, it does have a CSS. Okay, that's very strange. So something's going on here, and something's not lining up. Self.color red. Okay. Well, this is a really strange error. I haven't seen one that has decided to not show me what's undefined. Cannot read property 0 of undefined. So something column instead of columns with an S. Okay, so that took a little bit of time, but as you can see, using your debug tools is absolutely an amazing way to find all these issues. And if I'd paid more attention to my IDE, I would have seen that's not purple, and that was a problem. So let's refresh. Alright, so we will take that off, engine's back to running, and we're going to do the same command. I should be able to just press up on the keyboard, and there we go. So we now have 1, and that's not right, but we're starting to get something actually on the screen. Okay, so now we need to figure out why it's not right, and that will be in a future episode. Thank you guys very much.